got a presentation ready for us, and I'll hand you over to Anne. And this session we're going to have a few speakers, Anne and Annie from Central Coast, and Tracey and Sarah from Dungog. And I'll give you a 1 minute to go bell.
That would be very helpful. Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much, Heidi and Annie, for inviting me to be here today.
I want to have all this in front of you.
Okay. That's okay with me? Yeah, that's fine. Lovely to be here. Thanks so much for the invite. I've travelled all the way from the Blue Mountains today, and let me tell you, it's a whole lot warm down here than what it is up there. I'm a little bit scared to go home this afternoon because apparently there's going to be 100-kilometre gale force winds in the mountains. So I don't know what I'm going to find, but I have my disaster resilience hat on, so I'll be okay. So basically my presentation will be fairly short and sweet, I hope. I'll flick through here, and I'm talking about my experience in the 2013 bushfires in the Blue Mountains. A lot of you probably remember them, and as Shane was going through his presentation, boy did it bring back a lot of memories. Lots of similarities, I think, with bushfires. Okay. This is just for me to keep track of where I'm at. So basically, just to cast your minds back a little bit, October 2013, there were actually 3 fire events that impacted on our area. So there were the Lithgow fires. They're on the other side of the Blue Mountains as you come down. In Lithgow, the upper Blue Mountains, predominantly Mount Victoria and the Blackheath areas, and the lower Blue Mountains in the Springwood, Winmalee and Yellow Rock areas. The fire spread over a heck of a lot of hectares and burnt out a lot of bushland. We're quite similar, I guess, to some of the areas that I've been meeting people from today in terms of a lot of bush around. And a lot of that bush is surrounding homes and services and schools. So I'm going to focus my little story that I'm sharing with you today. I'm focusing on the Springwood fires. So basically, in the Lower Mountains fire, just that fire in itself, a total of 193 homes or buildings were destroyed, and 200 more damaged or made uninhabitable. So that's a heck of a lot of impact. And what is, I guess, when you think a relatively, small town or area, if you like. Total financial losses from all of the fires, that's Lithgow, Upper Mountains and Lower Mountains, at 170 million. The Blue Mountains is very, very focused on tourism. That is really pretty much our primary industry. And the hits that the tourist industry in the Blue Mountains took was massive. And it had lots of flow-on effects into the economy, local businesses, people's livelihood. So I'll just move this right along so you get an idea of the devastation. So the service that I was manager at, Gateway Family Services, back in 2013 we tapped on the shoulder and we formed step-by-step bushfire support service where we drew on members from the local community service organisation to pull a team together, the A-team if you like, or the dream team as I came to call them because they were so amazing. The work they did was bloody amazing. And we were tasked to provide short-term intensive crisis intervention and support to impacted residents. The model that we worked with at the time was very much aligned with the growing recognition of the role of community organisations and psychosocial recovery. So not just recovery of the built environment, but the recovery of people's hearts and minds and relational connections takes a lot longer. So step by step, and many other local community organisations in the Blue Mountains, we provided support to over 500 households in a 9-month period of time. Many challenges, many lessons learned along the way. So all of the events were started with stories that really helped to inform and deepen the lessons learned. So I'm going to share a really brief story with you now. And I do this with massive respect to the service that I'm about to speak of. Okay. So experiencing bushfire, I kind of thought of it as really a sensory experience. All of your senses are completely heightened and switched on big time. So sights of bushfire, smoke, actually not being able to see anything. Day turns into night. The sky is black. Sounds. What are the sounds? Sirens. The sound of wind as the fire comes rushing up. The smell, smoke, burning embers, other materials that are burning like plastic and metal. Taste, the taste of smoke. Dry mouth. Your feelings. Well, I'll leave that up to you to imagine what the feelings are. That's a quote that I took from a gentleman who was in the Tasmanian bushfires. And he basically, in talking about his experience, the power's gone out, it's stinking hot, the wind is blowing through, the only light is from the flames. So kind of try and imagine yourself in that situation. I try to do that millions of times myself. Now imagine all of this is happening while you have the care and responsibility for a group of young children aged 3 to 5 and a small number of staff, unable to evacuate your centre with fire burning up to the back entrance of the centre. So we got to know this centre and their story purely by accident, I'm afraid to say. It was through the local Blue Mountains grapevine that we'd heard about the experience of this particular centre, and I'm going to leave names out of it. And we got to know them because part of our brief of being part of the step-by-step was to respond to any need, regardless of where it came from and who it came from. But this was about 3 to 4 weeks after the fire event. And so eventually we made direct contact with this centre. And as the manager, I took it upon myself to go and meet with the director of this centre myself. What I was hit with was a barrage of rage and anger. This is real. And being a community organisation and somebody who's used to working with people in crisis, our training and our heart is in this work. And so I sat with her and just listened to and witnessed her deep trauma and pain. And we can totally understand it, right? Yeah. Part of the trauma was not the fact that they weren't able to evacuate, but came from a hope or an assumption, if you want to call it that, which was actually shared across a lot of the Blue Mountains, was the assumption that they held and the reality. The assumption was someone would come and evacuate us. The reality was no one came to evacuate us, we were alone. So that compounded the trauma. The next assumption and then reality check was people will know that we suffered and we suffered so much and come to offer support and help. The reality was people did not know what we had been through and we had to go and look for help. So I guess really, briefly, we worked with that centre in all the ways that we possibly could to provide support. There was, trauma counselling, etc., etc. But the key lesson from that little story for me was we need to be self-reliant. The cavalry is not necessarily coming. And I'm not saying that, emergency service don't do a fantastic job, they do, but they're busy trying to save homes and they can't go down every single street and knock down on every door. So we need to plan to be self-reliant and we need to work together to help each of us be self-reliant. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Crestani. Please welcome Anni Griffiths from Central Coast Council. Is the clicker?
speak for children's, that I'm coming on straight after Anne, because their story, that very story, is what started the Central Coast's journey on teaching resilience and preparedness in our community. And the first ones we did was to preschools because of that very story. So we invited various preschool owners, managers, directors to workshops. We had the SES, Verna's been to all of them, we had Shane and the RFS and all sorts of emergency workers there, and it was a 3-hour workshop, and we were working through sort of a very simplified version of what we're doing here today. One of the first things we did was we just asked the people there in the room, have you ever been through an experience of something, an emergency? And we didn't realise that one of our centres had been quite through a very, very significant emergency. And this is their story, which they've happily given me permission to pass on. And they called it with their students the day it started to snow on the Central Coast. And that's what the Central Coast looked like on that day. It's hail. So it was a normal school day. They had 59 students over 3 rooms. They knew that the weather was predicted to change that afternoon. And so they did all of their outside play in the morning, ready to be back inside for the afternoon. So they were having lunch when the black clouds started to come in and roll in, and then it started to rain, and rain really heavily. Then it started to hail little stones, then big stones, and then absolutely massive stones. And it was coming down, and it was going sideways, and it was going all over the place, really loud. They had brought all the children into the one room at this stage because there was so much noise and so much wind, and there was quite a deal of stress amongst the students. At first it was really exciting. They were all at the windows looking at it, but then they realised that really that was too dangerous, so they brought the kids more into the middle and closed the blinds down. The hail was so, there was so much hail that it blocked all of the downpipes, it blocked all of the gutters, and then it started loading up onto the roof. So much so that it was a really deep level of hail on the roof. At some point, because of all of the blockages of the downpipes, nothing could get away, water started coming in under the tiles, through the roof, pouring through every light switch, every down vent, absolutely everywhere in the room. So they were starting to realise this was a very dangerous situation, but what was the alternative? They couldn't go outside where it was still hailing, but they couldn't really stay inside where water's starting to pour through everything. They did turn off all the electricity, and they just tried to keep the kids calm and settle. At one stage, I think when the hail had stopped, when it stopped hailing, 2 staff members went outside to have a look around to see what they could do. And at that point, the awning of the veranda collapsed. Luckily, not on the 2 teachers, but they got back inside. But that then made their evacuation possible that way because of the collapsed ceiling. Now, at that point, they realised all of their exits led out to one of those flat awning roofs, and the same situation could have happened at any time, anywhere. They were then starting to also get families panicking, families come in, and as you saw on the roads there, it was a really dangerous situation with families coming in because there was accidents happening all over the place. And here's a little picture of where the awning has fallen down. Finally, they realised it was still, it had stopped hailing, but it was still too dangerous inside the building to stay there. They didn't know how much hail was on the roof and whether the whole preschool roof would come down. So they decided at that point to evacuate all the children through a window, 1 child at a time, to an area where they deemed safe. Some of the children, it was babies to 4-year-olds, some of the children who'd been upstairs had no jumpers, no shoes, and they obviously couldn't go up to that room and get them. Some of the babies are actually still asleep, amazingly. And at that stage of the fire, the RFS did come and help them to evacuate. And that's the window that they passed every child through to get out of that area. And then neighbours came and helped. Families eventually came. But there was some really take-home lessons that the director of this preschool said to me, and what she wanted to pass on. She apologised for not being able to come today. And one is the length that an emergency takes. She said they do drills, they do preparation, they go through things with kids, and then you finish that and you think it's all over. This went on and on and on and on. It went from early afternoon right through past 7:30. They were still in an emergency situation. She said nothing she had done had prepared her for that. The other thing was that plans had to constantly change. They had their plans. They thought they knew what they were doing in an emergency, but every time there was another twist and they had to reassess and work out again what was the best situation, what was the best scenario in that situation. And again, nothing that they had come across in all of their drills and preparation. They had, things that they hadn't thought about. The fact that their staff also had homes and children out there that they were worried about and wanting to get back to them but couldn't because they had the responsibility of the children. They were mindful when the media started to come. And also mindful of the families of their children and what had happened to their homes. The big legacy is that centre was closed for 3 weeks. So obviously an impact on them financially, but also for their children. They realised that was also, the children had been through a really harrowing experience. They were traumatised, and then the safety of their friends and their preschool was also gone. So luckily they did do a few family-orientated community things which helped them. And they said, really, for the next 6 to 12 months, for some of those children, they panicked every time it rained. So it was that long-lasting good.
Thank you so much. Thank you very, very, very much. After Annie, now we're going to hear from Tracey, then Sarah. So, okay. Yeah. So Tracey, then Sarah. Yeah, you're going to pull it out and then should be freaking. Yeah. All right.
Okay, thank you very much for having us. I'm from council. My name is Tracey Lowry, obviously, and I'm a community project officer. I work with a lot of community organisations, and my role in council is to have. Sorry, I speak exceptionally fast. My role in council is to have those community connections. What we're going to present to you today is the 2015 floods for us. What actually happened, I wasn't at work when it happened. You're never where you should be when you want to. I was actually stuck outside. I couldn't get in for the first 24 to 48 hours. And when I did get in, I never actually anticipated what I was coming into. We had one staff member that was isolated and left on the inside, and the rest of us were on the outside. Sarah's centre and her staff were also very fortunate enough. They were on the inside, so they were actually part of that initial process that needed to happen within the community. Do you want to press? Yeah, thank you. So this is who we are. We're just a normal country town, like most country towns. We have everything from your cows to your kids to your festivals. This is what happened in our town. None of us expected that.
I just want to say, and it's too late now, the slides are, a trigger warning. I have shared this story a lot, and I get a lot of people always say, you made me cry. So I just want to say it's okay if you do. It's also okay if you want to just take a moment to step outside. But we will be sharing a few images. I don't share many of the devastation because that's actually not what our community is. But we do share a few just to paint the picture. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's okay. So this is what we were faced with. Now from a council perspective, our role isn't the same as you as community. There is an expectation by the community that council will fix this. Council will come in, we will open roads, we will clean up, We will do whatever's needed to do. You can't fix that within 24 hours. Can't even fix it 5 years on. But the main reason I wanted to just give you an idea is we have priorities within council of getting you back into your homes, getting roads open, getting people back to where they should be and presenting some sort of normality within a short period of time. The biggest hurdle we have with that is not only that our staff are isolated, but our staff are also part of this clean-up team. Our staff are volunteers within the community. Our staff, some of these are our staff's homes. So there's a level of expectation from council of what we need to deliver, but what Sarah's warning is, we also as a staff had to, for that split second, forget who we were as a person or a family person and do our job. And our job was helped immensely by people like you sitting in. This is what rolled in from our community. Everyone stood up, regardless of what they didn't have or they did have or what had happened, and they did this. So council decided this wasn't our role to do. Council decided our role was the slide before, to do what we needed to do from an infrastructure perspective and hand over to organisations like Sarah to do this part, to play your role, use your networks, your connections and your ability to deliver what was needed for the community from a social perspective. Yeah.
I didn't know anything that Tracey just said on the 20th of April 2015. I didn't know that was my role.
We didn't know it was her role either, but that's where we sent it.
I just happened to be Johnny on the spot. 20th of April 2015, the Dungog Shire Community Centre had a youth program. We supported vulnerable young people and their families. We had adolescent family counselling and a number of programs for young people both in the local high school and through the community. We had an emergency relief program once a week. People that were in food vulnerability or shortage, had challenges paying their utility bills, those sorts of things, would come and we would sit with them and assist them in the ways that we could. We have a Centrelink agency. We're very fortunate for Dungog. That's open Mondays through Friday, just in the mornings. And we can help people with a few basic Centrelink inquiries. We have some family programs. We support a playgroup and a number of other typical neighbourhood centre activities. 21st of April 2015, Dungog became the town of the house that washed down the river and went under the bridge. All are nodding, you know that image. I was at home with my children. My husband was in the Rural Fire Brigade. He'd been called to Stroud at about 3 or 4 o'clock that morning. I lost contact with Dungog at 10 o'clock in the morning. I was speaking to Nina, our Centrelink agent worker, and she said, "What do we do? Everyone's here. It's really bad." And I just think, well, just to help people. Do what we have, help people. The last words I said to Nina were, "Love town." And the line went dead. And Lordy did that staff love town. I mean, man, they were amazing. So we opened up the emergency relief program. Anyone that walked in that needed anything, we opened our hearts and our pockets, and they weren't that deep. That's another story. So we supported the community with what we had in a way that made sense to the people who came, meeting the immediate need and giving them reassurance that we were there and that we would be there. So that kept happening. Then this happened. We kind of knew the roads were opening, and the only thing that I had to prepare myself for this was from my memories of watching the news footage of the Victorian fires. And I thought, I remember all the piles and piles and piles of donations. And I was at a daily briefing meeting that I somehow piggybacked and found, and they were saying the roads are opening tomorrow. And I went, well then who organises this? Because we'll get stuff coming, won't we? Like there'll be people and there'll be stuff, and someone does that, yeah? Because that happens all the time, I gather. No. No one does that bit. That's up to the community. And I went, So the police officer that was running that meeting said to me, Sarah, can you do something about that? And I went, sure. So we went to the pavilion at the showground, because our Dungog show isn't until the second weekend in November, so do come. Great show. But it's not till the 2nd November, and this was April, and I figured, well, Norma won't need a sponge cake in that pavilion for quite some time. I reckon we could go there, safe bet it'll be empty. And we took over the showground. We also took over every space at the showground, not just the pavilion. We had donations of white goods, furniture, I ended up being the spritzer girl at the Dungog showground. We had a box of perfume donated, and we all stank to high heaven, so it was quite a relief. But I ended up being the spritzer girl and handing out perfume samples, because you need to really wear and own the scent that you're going to walk around town with. So we wanted to explore and make sure that we really represented who we were. Food comes in. Now, food is such a healing process. To share a meal, to cook a meal with love, and then give it to someone else to nourish their body, but also nourish their heart and their soul, is a really powerful thing. And the food came, and it was greatly and generously shared in our community. But it's really hard to go to the Baptist Church Hall. And now that I've just had a set of keys that I hadn't returned, let's chuck food there because it's going to be a big moment. Thank goodness the church is so wonderful. But we took over the Baptist Church Hall, but it's really hard to go there and have nothing and constantly being given. When you have no capacity or way to give back, it's incredibly humiliating, and you lose your dignity in that moment. You lose your dignity when you're 82 and you're standing in the main street of Dungog and your clothes have been ripped from your back because the water rushed past you so quickly. So we had so many people that had lost who they were. We had to recreate dignity and give people a sense of purpose and connection back to their community. So we went down to the IGA. We did simple little things. You become the spritzer girl of Dungog. But you also go down to the IGA and you borrow a stack of trolleys, and you have them at the Baptist Church Hall. So when people go shopping, it's not actually just taking items from the tables that have been set up, but it's actually a bit funny and a laugh. And it's a bit normal to walk through the aisles with a trolley. So it's just those really simple little things. We had to control the volume of information that came in. I didn't have a system for that. So we made it really simple. Heidi said earlier, you'll need a camera for these exercises. Don't move without your camera and your phone. We wrote information down everywhere. We still had no power, no data, those sorts of things. It was back to basics. So we wrote everything down, and we ran a community college on the side as well, and no one was doing a first aid certificate at that stage. So they really didn't have much to do. So I tasked John and Jane with running around town, and every 4 hours they took a photo of every message board that was in the community so that we could keep track of the information and the way it changed over time. So I'll just go back. The CWA are amazing people. We all know that because we all have their cookbook at the back of the cupboard, and when we want to do an espresso, it's fantastic sponge. We pull that cookbook out. But they also, in Dungog, we're all married to the Rotary. It's a 2-for-1 deal. So we had the Rotary and the CWA in the CWA hall, which was at the centre of town. And we had a volunteer here sign out the front, and we had a volunteer at the CWA sign at all the entry points to town. So when volunteers came, they didn't just go and start helping, which is wonderful, we need that. But people may not have been ready for them to be in their homes. I remember the footage of the Brisbane floods, and Koshi and Mel, I love the media, were standing in someone's front lawn. And this guy had his hands, he was walking out of someone's home, and his arms were full of muck and belongings and mud and water. And Koshi stuck the microphone in this guy's face and said, "What are you doing here, mate?" He goes, "I'm up from Melbourne, I've driven all night, I'm here to help." And I was sitting at home in Mount Victoria watching the news, and all I could think of was, is the person that owned that home, are they there? Have they said that's okay? And are they controlling this experience? And now, as I've connected with many other people that have had an experience, I now find out that one of the most traumatic things that came out of the Brisbane floods was the lack of control that people had for what happened to their belongings. People were evacuated and went and stayed with friends and family and were safe, to come home to an entire house stripped. Everything gone. They didn't have a choice of what they saved. They didn't have the experience of seeing what their home was to actually understand their loss. They weren't part of that process. Now, people came with goodwill and good intention, and I don't believe anyone enters this space without genuine love in their heart. But we need to be respectful to the individuals in the community with which we come to support. Yep.
So this is where council kicks back in. While Sarah's doing that behind the scenes, we actually step forward, and this is who we are. We're getting crucified because we can't provide a bridge. Bring the army in, do this, do whatever. We're doing the best we can. We have to bring in engineers, we have to look at, we can't just whack a bridge in. You know, as much as I'd like to think we can't do it. I don't care whether you're the biggest council or the smallest council. Reality check is, love to have brought the army in. You've got no idea what that community put council through with regards to this isolation. This side of the river is Gresford, that side is Torreybourne. There was roughly 38 families that were isolated. We were helo dropping food in, we were doing everything, but we could not get that bridge across. So people like Sarah, in the sense of Sarah's community centres, and people like yourself become very innovative. The crate you see here is that's what we loaded up most mornings with medication. We were able to get that on a flying fox across the river and be able to do it. We were dropping books, we were sending parcels, you name it, we did it. We put in a footbridge. And what happened? It rained again. What do you think happened to the bridge? We are currently 4 years on still negotiating with the landowners to get an access road so that that community will never be isolated again. And 4 years on, we still haven't succeeded with this. So Sarah's dealing, and I say Sarah, but I'm talking about the community centre, and all those other community organisations, Neighbour Care, are doing what we call behind the scenes and doing our social fibre, while as council we're trying to get that infrastructure back running.
Just very quickly with this slide. As you know, our event happened on the 21st of April. 25th of April, Anzac Day. First opportunity for our town to come together, as all communities do on that day. People were really nervous about what that day might mean, and they were also really excited about the opportunity to come, focus on something else for a moment, but be together. So I was up at the clothing pool. I'd been called up to do some, not to be Spritz girl, but do some actual work. And I noticed a gentleman I've known all my life. I'm 6th generation Dungogian. Never thought I'd be back. And I was there in the clothing pool, and this gentleman that I've known all my life was standing there, and he looked, just staring at the pile of clothing, looked quite lost. And I went up and started talking to him. He needed a pair of pants. So we found a pair of tracksuit pants. He just wanted something simple. He said, I've got that, I'll go. Started saying, what else have you got? What else might you need? And we're going through that process. And he got a few things, but I didn't feel like we'd got to where he was at. So we sat and had a cup of tea. And then eventually he told me that it was Anzac Day coming up and that he wasn't marching. And I said, well, you can. That's okay. Maybe I can march with you. We could get a car. You know, there's options to be in the march. No, I'm not marching. This went on for a while, and it came to be that he couldn't march because he wouldn't march in tracksuit pants, because he wouldn't honour his or his mate's service in tracksuit pants, and he'd lost everything. So the call went out. Everyone that marched with a suit, with shoes, with a tie, with dignity. That's the sort of stuff that the community organisations and the community does. As Tracey said, we do that stuff. We then had Mother's Day coming up. I remember it was Wednesday morning at about 4 o'clock in the morning, and I sat bolt upright in bed, and I just went, oh no, it's Mother's Day on Sunday. If any of the blokes in town or in Torreybourne are anything like my husband, they were shopping on Saturday. No one is getting out of town to buy Mum anything. So again, we put the call out, and we sent over to Torreybourne. We sent Anzac biscuits and rosemary on Anzac Day for everyone in Torreybourne because they couldn't get out to get to a march. And on Mother's Day, they all got cards and slippers and nail polish and all of the little things so that every child could give Mum and Grandma a gift, and every husband could say thanks, and every mum could feel cherished. So I'll just speak quickly to the top corner. That's the community centre's foyer. And that was Nina's desk here. But we accidentally suddenly became the spontaneous temporary recovery centre. So we normally have 6 part-time staff, and we had Centrelink disaster teams, family and community services disaster teams, chaplains, disaster team, Australian Insurance Council, housing disaster team. We had teams that I didn't know existed, but gosh, we were glad those people walked in our door. But very quickly we went from 6 part-time staff to about 20, and in the first 3 days we had over 300 people come through our building to seek assistance. Then the recovery centre was opened up in the Doug Waters Pavilion, which was the council.
The
Doug Walters Pavilion very quickly was our emergency operations centre. It was the only building we had that was out of a war zone. So basically we set it up in that, which pushed everything, what Sarah was saying, back into her space. Because we couldn't use it for a dual purpose. I can't have all combat agencies trying to look at logistics and have the same thing. So once again, we were limited with where we could put things and what we could do. So once I moved all the combat agencies out, I could actually move those people back in. It was almost like, you know, come on guys, and I say this respectfully, SES, get a wriggle on, we need to get you out of here so we can get some. And we are making a little bit of a light joke about it, but it's actually not funny. It really isn't, because when you're standing there and you've got one organisation trying to do their job in a confined space with limited resources, our council only has a staff of 70. Bear in mind we've lost 15 to 20% of them already because of their commitment to other volunteer services within it. We've got the place looking like a war zone. We've got people finally, once communication got back up, telling us of houses and roads and devastation that we didn't even know existed because we couldn't get back out there. And in the middle of all this, everyone wants to stand there and scream at me, and I say that nicely, well, Tracey, you're the lady, what are you going to do about it? Sarah says about, you know, her team and her staff. Our team, our staff stepped up and they did an incredible job under extreme circumstances. The biggest advantage we have now is we actually look back and we review that and say, how can we do it better? How do we work better with them? How do we share a resource? How do we get the community to know what we can and can't do and how we can do it? So one of the advantages, if you want to say the trauma and the stress that this caused, is also given us the ability now to actually build a better foundation with the resources that we have. We're not going to pretend we're going to get resources from somewhere else. We're not going to pretend we're going to get funding or whatever. We're going to work with what we've got, identify the areas of need and the priorities so that we can move it forward.
So just on that, Tracey and I have privately known each other for years. Tracey's grandchildren and my children are friends. And we've worked as the Community Development Officer for the Council and manager of the community centre for years on all sorts of projects. When this happened though, and Tracey wasn't there, and I turned up to go, hey, there's like 300 people in our building and we don't know what to do, so this is what we're doing. Council literally said to me, so why are you here? And oh, because I've got people, lots of them, and someone had a plan for this, right? Like someone's had a plan for this. Someone knew this would happen, and that, you know, we would need to do stuff. So what is that plan making useful? Because I hadn't had a relationship with the local emergency management committee, I wasn't on their plan. I wasn't in their thinking. No one for the first 24, 48 hours actually had any idea what Sarah was doing at the back of the room, because we weren't part of their thinking. So my message to you, if you're a childcare centre, if you're an NDIS provider, if you're a neighbourhood centre, go to your local council, know your community development officer, but know your local emergency management coordinator. Get yourself in that committee, get yourself in that door now, because whether they want you there or not, your people will want you there and need you there. Now very quickly, the other thing that is a pain in the butt, and I was told by Sherilyn and Tracey at first, and I did put my foot down on this one, sorry Trace, don't put the politicians there, they always bloody come and own everything. And they do. But every single one of these pictures, and I could have put up another 10 more, represent about 3 or 4 days where I didn't have time to help my community because I was managing their photo opportunity. They come when you least expect it, you get no warning, and they're there. And they want the photo, and they want to meet someone that's hurt, and they want to be part of it, and they want to show they care. But the other thing is, if you don't have a plan on what you're going to do when they come, you get nothing. Tony Abbott came to Dungog, CWA had to bake scones for a day. Everyone was in the Doug Walters Pavilion because everyone wanted to meet him, because when's the Prime Minister ever going to walk down the main street of Dungog again? Never. So everyone wanted to meet him and be there. Everyone wanted to share their story of loss because theirs mattered and their progression wasn't happening quick enough. They didn't have answers, they didn't have the things they needed. The bloke at the top will make it happen. Tony Abbott went to the bottom part, put $50 across the bar and shouted everyone a beer. That's the only bit of money we ever got beyond the standard recovery process. Now our council, and with no disrespect whatsoever because the staff and the councillors are phenomenal, but we didn't, as a community, we didn't know what to ask from the Prime Minister when he came. We shared our stories of loss, but no one said actually the showground was uninsured and doesn't have a ground, so we've got a show in November. So what are you going to do about it? I do have one story of amazement. Maurice Payne came and she said, what do you need? She was the Minister for Human Services then. And I didn't know what I needed. And I didn't know what to say to her. And then I looked downstairs, we were just standing at the top of the foyer area, and I looked down and I went, oh, hang on, how am I going to pay Nina? She's been working 7 days a week for 3 weeks. She only works 7, 9 hours a day she's been working. She normally only works 9 to 1, Monday to Friday. I don't have a budget for that. And I literally turned to Maurice and I said, I'd love all of Nina's wages for all of this to be covered. Leave it with me, she said, not a problem. And literally 3 weeks later, I got a cheque. But I think probably for me, the moral of our community's story is summed up in this. And this is from a gentleman who was from New Orleans. He didn't work in the disaster space at all. He had a job. He just moved to New Orleans, had a job at the university. He moved there with his family. They were Jewish. They were celebrating a significant cultural moment and religious moment for them. And they were staying in the house, locked down, no media, no news, no outside for a couple of days. They didn't know that Hurricane Katrina was coming. So their neighbours were evacuating and went, hang on, people moved in the other day, their car's still there. As they're leaving, they're banging on the door saying, hey guys, you better get out because it's bad. So Daniel and his wife grabbed their kids, threw them in the car and spent the next 3 days, like everybody else trying to leave New Orleans, on the freeways trying to get out of that city. They didn't know their neighbours, they didn't know anyone, they just drove. And then Daniel kind of went, well, this is, wow. And then when he looked at his town to try and come back, people were coming back on their own, no one was coming back together, people came back, there was no neighbours. It wasn't the community, it wasn't the space that he knew. And so Daniel started to actually research this, and what he found was that the strength and cohesion of a community before the disaster was one of the best predictors for recovery after. So it's not how much money your council can get access to, although Lordy, that helps. It's not how quickly you can rebuild that bridge. It's actually how connected you are as a community to your book club, to your yoga group, to your church, to your preschool, to your neighbourhood centre, to your NDIS provider. All of those links that you have build your resilience, build your strength for every day. Hey, they're good for a cup of sugar, they'll grab the kids if you're late, because mine are today, because I don't know whether I'll get home. But they're also good for when it's really, really bad, because they're your people, they look for you, and you look for them. So we got some funding from the Office of Emergency Management, which was just extraordinary, and we developed very similarly to step-by-step Project Bounce Forward. We were really, really fortunate. Similarly, our funding was for the individual personal recovery and support. But we were really lucky we had the NIB Foundation knock on our door and give us $50,000. They didn't know why, they just knew they needed to do good with it. And so we developed our community renewal process that followed and partnered with the human and individual community recovery. So it was whole of community. And we did all sorts of activities throughout the 12 months of that program. We linked people with donations. We managed the recovery fund, which gave people cars and helped them rebuild their homes. We also coordinated a lot of other activities that come to town. So we had Buddhist groups that come with money that just want to love you and give you support. The Habitat for Humanity came and redid everybody's gardens. There are people that come and love you, and you don't know they exist until they're there, and they are extraordinary. But it actually requires a lot of management support to connect that so that the community can let you get the best out of what is available to them. Did you want to quickly talk now?
1 minute.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is where you don't like us as a council, as part of this recovery process. You actually hate us with a passion. Child service down here was one of the ones that was washed away. 2 years jumping through legislation, planning requirements, health and everything. We now have this. Now I do have a little bit of liberty to say, because my husband was one of the builders that actually built that. Well, he was the builder that built that. And what he went through with council to get it from that to that, I do actually have a bit of an understanding as to why he doesn't particularly like me and what I do. In our defence, we have never ever, we've had floods before and we've lost houses and things like that, but we've never had a loss of life, we've never had a destruction on the magnitude that we had. So as council staff, some of us were struggling to even know how we actually got our heads around it. How did we move forward? How would the legislation let us be a little bit flexible? So what council provided was the tyre service. We had an empty building that was inundated with flood, but it could be used for an industrial purpose. We let the tyre service move in, allow those, they employed 4 members of the community, so 4 families will still be able to stay employed. Why, for want of a better word, we sorted out the legislation and the planning requirements. Can I say it was a great day in Dowling Street when that tyre service finally opened. It was also a very good learning curve for council in a flood situation. How do we handle that? How do we process that? And how do we get you to like us? Because you didn't, trust me. Some of you still don't like us, but that's okay. So part of this process is, the reason why Shire and I have shared this, is there's 2 prongs to any recovery. There's the framework and the legislation, there's all the requirements that go with it, and then there's the social weave and the social fibre. And the best combination you can get is if you can actually work together. And as Sarah said, the biggest disadvantage, I was out of the picture for 24 to 48 hours because I physically could not get back into town. Once I got back into town, the dynamics changed a little bit, and I had a general manager at the time that literally said, Tracey, you do what you need to do, you go and do it. And that's how we got it. And there is a recognition, but it's a very small recognition of those links and networks, and particularly at council at a different level. And I guess today part of our role is to encourage you, as Sarah said, and challenge you that if you don't have those links with council, come and find us, come and talk to us, and tell us what you want and how you need us to work with you. Because if you don't tell us, a bit like one of the other presenters, if we don't know about it, we actually can't, for want of a better word, fix it either. Because there's always not going to be a Sarah and Tracey combination in a community. Okay, so it's much your responsibility to come and bang on our doors. But thank you for the time, and it was a great partnership in the end. We're still partnering, and there's still a lot of devastation. And it's true what Sarah said in that opening slide. There are some days, particularly when I go to different facilities and different homes, particularly with what my husband had to rebuild, that you take a double take and you think, you know what, you may not believe in anything, but I do actually say thank you, Lord, because we only lost 3. We could have lost an incredible amount of people. And for those that did have that loss, our heart still goes to them. But for those that we were able to not lose, we were very thankful.
Tracey Lowry from Dungog. Let's give them another thank you. And actually, I'd like to, I've got some thank yous for the community people who've come a long way. A little gift of some locally crafted cheese from the Central Coast. So, and a special gift, because in Dungog, the Sherilyn Brown, who was unable to attend today, was the only person in my study who managed to get through the 6 steps to resilient community organisations. So, you can see that Dungog had a really strong hand on the hot plate learning experience, and Sherilyn's organisation has stepped up with that motivation, and I've got an artwork for Sherilyn as the champion of my research project. This is by Stephen Dodd, who's an artist with disabilities in Newcastle. So, you could, there you go, thank you, Sarah. Thank you. One for Sherilyn. And Crestani, could you pop up? Thank you so much, Tracey. Thanks for making the journey.
Thank you for letting us going over time.
Well, come and get your pen. Thank you so much, Anni, for travelling down from the Blue Mountains. Still got that other one. So, where you're sitting at the moment, it's just time for probably closing your eyes to breathe. So, unless you're watching Auslan, you could take a moment to just go into the reflective place inside yourself with your eyes open or closed, and just take a moment to think about where we've come from this morning and what's made an impression on you. These days can be really busy with lots of talking, and quiet time is important. Yes, stretch your body if you need to. Our next activity is called Connect to Prepare. Something I borrowed from a resource developed in Dungog. Because in an emergency, we go to who we know. And if we could just meet as many people as we can and understand about our capacities, our strengths, our vulnerabilities, then in an emergency, we actually have people who to call on. And because this is the world of disaster risk reduction, this is not just about knee-jerk reactions when something adverse occurs. This is about getting prepared. So these relationships that you build today, don't wait till there's a crisis. This is the time to use these relationships and develop them and build on them and develop your own community web of preparedness. So the things that we'll need for this activity are your message page, the yellow one, the other side of it. And if you brought an emergency policy, you can use that for a bit of a cheat sheet. I'd just like to, if someone could lend me their message page, could I borrow this for everyone? I'd like to talk through it a little bit so that you're not left wondering. The organisation name, that's question one. If you're a student at a TAFE, then you can put your TAFE. If you've come independently, then maybe you'd like to sit and help somebody else out, but maybe you'd like to just use a business or your council. So the organisation name, the official phone number, the official email, the emergency phone contact, the official emergency phone contact, but also the contact person that's you, because this is the person that you are really needing. And I don't know about you, but when I know somebody, a person in an organisation, even if I've been given their name and their email address, if we've had a phone conversation before or met in person, then it's much easier for me to pick up the phone to the real person who I really know. So do put a contact for you, and an email, and your name. Now this one, this question, operational postcodes, this came to light through a conversation with a council community engagement person, was that they were not sure of how many community organisations and which community organisations were actually operating within their area. So if you think of your organisation, you might have a premises in 2294, but you might be operating across 7 or 8 different other postcodes. So if you can write down your postcode, and that would be great. And I do suggest if you're making contact with your local council as a community organisation, you say, hey, this is us, this is our name, and these are our operational postcodes. Now, our vital or core functions, these are the things that really need to happen. These are not the things that you can put aside for another day. These are the things that something will go wrong, somebody might be hurt, something might be the matter if this part of your operation doesn't go on for a day or a week. The vital functions, The critical links or failure points. What are those vital functions reliant on? Is it the roads? Is it your telecommunications? If something goes down that would take out your vital functions, what could those critical links or critical failure points be? Is that clear? Couple of nods. Help we might need if those critical links went down. What kind of help, assistance might you need? And if those kind of critical links went down for other people around you, what kind of resources might you be able to offer? And I guess in terms of that, the resources offered, what kind of resources could you offer in preparation, in preparedness, and disaster prevention and disaster recovery? Okay, so that's the form. You've got a little bit of time. Buddy up in 2s or 3s to actually fill this out, think about it together. And I'll be back with you in 10 minutes. For your own organisation.
Where is it? They're all gone.
Is anyone unclear? Wave your arm. Is anyone too alone and need a buddy? Wave your arm. Does anyone need help? Wave your arm. Write down your own information. Oh, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen. Write clearly, please write clearly. Okay, do get these filled out, guys, because you really want your... Excuse me, could I have your attention, please? That was three. That was I really need your attention. I'm going to give you the next something in a minute, but please fill out as many details as you can on each of the sheets, even if you don't think it's relevant for you. Do get it filled out, and if you can use a text to colour for any of the answers you haven't done, please use a text to colour. There's text to colours on the table. Just change over to text to colours because they're easy photographed. Can you see the text to colours? Yes. Find the text to colours. Get out the purple and the brown. And use what you can. Use those ones to finish it off because it's easier to see. I'm sorry I didn't get that information to you earlier. Is anyone confused? Waggle your hand.
Yeah, I wish we communicated better with the nursing. So, I don't know. Managers putting into place training already existing.
Yeah. I saw a vacancy there for a minute.
castles actually came into Sydney to actually get in the way with the general. We're the smallest team, a regional team, and we're the smallest teams, which is quite popular, and that just shows our character is that we communicate with each other. There's that barriers. Well, the thing is, there's some stages and I just have a role to I'm not selfish, I would say. I don't know, I'm going to keep that other thing. I don't think because it's about the thing is,